Welcome to Tea and Coffee. No, shoot, this is not Tea and Coffee. This is Behind the Words. Welcome to Behind the Words, where, oh, my dog is here, where we, as Westerners, watch videos of people who are Chinese, and we try to understand what they're saying and what the meaning behind them is. I am Pistachio. I am a Westerner who used to live in China. I have a little bit of Mandarin comprehension.
I am Byron, and today I am not looking forward to this session one bit because we are watching me talk to Miles Guo, and there is nothing I like less than watching myself. So very excited for today.
Who the fuck am I? I'm here just trying to make sure everything trying to like how to connect together, make sense.
You're our Chinese speaker. This is the Chinese person that helps us.
Three levels of Chinese. My level, Pistachio's level, and HolyNuts level.
That's actually a pretty good way to think about it.
My level is 0, by the way, if anyone's wondering. Apart from about 3 or 4 words, which I'm not allowed to say during this show.
My dog really wants to be the new star of this show. Every time I do a recording, she comes in now and she sits on my lap. So we're going to be watching a few clips from this live broadcast that was from the New Federal State of China TV edition, specifically the English-speaking group of people, because that is where Byron spoke. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the questions that were asked.
Hello there, Miles. Very, very happy to get the chance to speak to you finally. I am with the Quantum Farm. I'm from the UK. I've been in the NFSC News for coming up to a year now, doing editing, broadcasting, and even a bit of script writing. Just taking a little bit of a break at the minute to go back to work for a period of time, but I am going to be back in the newsroom very soon. Thanks for talking to me, Mr. Guo.
Okay, now we pause here. So
I just want to apologize to everyone. I didn't know what to call him at the end, and Mr. Guo was not exactly the right thing to call him. So I do apologize, Mr. Guo.
Honestly, you pronounced it better than some people. Some people can't even say Guo. You know, they're like, go.
I used to call him Mr. Go, but now I know
Mr.
it's
Go.
Right. I like you from UK. I'm only speak a little bit English. So bad. I'm so sorry. Do you think, Brian, I'm English, pronunciation is good?
Your English is better than my Chinese, Miles. So it's very.
This is the call. I'm so sorry, Kevin J. Amanda, I'm no, good speak good English, full English, smooth. But I create another English called good English. So good English is 70% is from the body language. You need to understand. So that's angry, that's happy, that's a song, dancing. So another 25% is from the language, from the tongue. I'm so sorry.
I love that.
I confidence do everything. I think I can do everything, but only the language. I do not, as God, take the buttons. I cannot speak full English. So that's big trouble for me.
I only have one question about the Guo English bit. I understood pretty much exactly what he was saying, except about God and the buttons. What is he trying to say here?
Yeah, I was going to stop at that bit because I was wondering what he meant with that buttons. Was it buttons he said?
Let's rewind a little bit.
I think he's trying to say that God was like, when he was creating him, there were like some wires crossed maybe with the language, but I'm not sure.
The language, I do not, as God, take the buttons. I cannot speak full English.
Take my buttons.
Big trouble.
God away my buttons. Okay. I think he was just saying that he wasn't blessed with the ability to speak English. I mean, what more does he need to do? I think the fact that he can't speak English is a very small, significant thing when you consider what he's doing.
Well, we always say if he can actually speak better English, the whole movement may fast forward a whole fucking year, maybe even.
It would be great. And Mr. Cow, like he said, I'm sure I know Mr. Cow very well. He would definitely go and teach him English.
But the point is that what we speak, any language, the goal is to communicate. Right.
That's the point
It's
of
fine.
the Guo English, right? It's supposed
Yeah.
to be he can communicate mostly, which to be fair, when I lived in China, that's how most foreigners get around. They speak very little Mandarin, but there's a lot of body language.
So, all right, let's keep going.
Until you see Mr. Cal waving his arms.
特别是最近啊，
Oh, wait.
突破
All right, see what he said.
这个咱们国际部真的是做的越来越好，特别是最近啊，就是也是越来越短，而且我觉得主题呢没有重复。我觉得我们真的不要像中国人包饺子似的，什么东西都放进去，大家吃完以后就觉得这是饺子，但是分不清是什么馅儿的，甚至放什么菜都不知道。但是
So
Then I have to
basically,
go
what
back
he
and read it
said
all.
is that the new State of China News, the international department, is getting better. The show getting shorter, getting more focused, less repeat itself. He's trying to say, avoid a mistake. For example, like Chinese do dumpling. You put everything into one dumpling, and then when people eat it, they say, okay, this is a dumpling, but they don't even know what is inside. So try to avoid the show in this way. And which is what we're trying to do right now, is like get to the point, translate it or communicate it, and then move on. Instead of keep yapping. Yeah.
特别是就是现在我们希望就是让西方人最简单的知道武汉发生了什么，是吧？
So the whole goal is let the West to the most straightforward to understand what message you want to communicate. For example, what happened in Wuhan, what happened in Xinjiang, that kind of idea.
西藏发生什么，新疆发生了什么，然后香港发生了什么，然后这个气球不论怎么来到美国了，把新中国联邦提供的情报准确的用英文最简单的方式啊，而且不是那种官僚式的语言，用科技来传达给西方，这是。
So he also mentioned a very important bit about he hoped this news can communicate the intel the State of China provide to the West, very direct, without all this news. Right now, you see CNN and BBC, all that kind of thing. Just straightforward and tell people what it is, let them understand. That's it.
最核心的，我觉得我们还太有点，你们想学什么 CNN， 学福克斯，学什么这个BBC， 那是很傻的，那些都。
And he pointed out that whoever have the idea want to learn the BBC and CNN, have someone like anchor that kind of style, he said it's very stupid. It's actually outdated, he said.
的媒体，因为那些已经在疫苗问题上，在病毒问题上，在共产党的问题上，和西方的所有的资本主义存在的，已经忘掉上帝的这事情上，已经遭到了打脸，他已经被淘汰了。
So because what the vaccine, virus, CCP, and all that kind of thing, they've been proven not honest. So the whole idea of news have a bad taste in people's mind.
Yeah, it's tainted.
Do you agree with that, Byron?
This is an idea I posed to say something more along the lines of a hybrid between the traditional anchor style of news and more like a relaxed podcast or a personal kind of show where you're just presenting facts and information. That was an idea I had because I personally don't watch the news, never have watched the news, don't trust the news, don't trust the government.
We get everything from the internet and they get all of their news from social media. So it just doesn't make sense to have like an anchor system anymore.
Our way of doing the show should be the way to go. Let me ask you, what is formal means to you?
Formal is basically having no opinion sometimes, of fearing to put your opinion across, or just looking like you're trying to do a presentation to a client. Whereas, you know, what I would class as what I enjoy watching is something more like Joe Rogan.
It's authentic. The authenticity is really what people are looking for. It doesn't have to be formal, informal, like those types of things. I think can have a certain spectrum at this point, because I've seen people do really nice videos and they're outside in nature. It can still be presented really well. I would never say that outside in nature is considered formal, but as long as it's presented in an authentic, pleasing way, you're trying to, like HolyNuts was saying, communicate something. So you just make sure that your message is really there and it's not being befuddled by other insignificant things, because that's really what happens with the formalities. There are a lot of insignificant factors that are then getting introduced.
Like the way Miles Guo himself does many of his broadcasts. He's just talking like he would talk to anybody. I mean, he always looks good. It's because he's got his own fashion brand, so he's got good clothes.
All right, let's keep moving.
勇敢的走出自己的路啊，这是我强烈建议的，要短，要直接，要用最快的方式，非盖特方式传到世界各地去，啊，最快的。
So he mentioned a few points. To me, is actually quite important. He said need to be brave, to make it short, make it straightforward, concise, and also not just posting on don't do echo chamber, reaching out on other channel like YouTube, Twitter, even go out and talk to people, go in on the street and talk to people, show them clips and shit. Need to be brave, cannot just keep doing like everybody does. That's very important, in my opinion. So Miles just confirming what Byron's been doing is pretty cool. All right, but let's move on.
最简单的、最直接的，而最不是那些所谓传统化的方式来表达出来。谢谢。
All right, I think what he said is very important, like pointing out the direction and what he really wants and what is actually practical, what is useful for this movement. And that's something we've been doing. And we're not saying we're doing it right. I think thanks for you guys. We can actually bridge a little bit the gap, send out the real information.
I have a quick question before we go on. Byron, would it have been useful for you to hear that being translated at the time, or would it have not influenced anything? Just out of curiosity.
It would have been very useful because he said things within there that I would probably have wanted to respond to, or at least if I was given the opportunity to have an input, I would have probably have said something, but I didn't have a clue what he was saying, so I was just trying to smile and wait for my chance to say something.
He was actually asking someone to translate it for you guys, so he doesn't need to speak his core English.
Well, because from me, as somebody who can sort of understand what he's saying, I think what he said was actually very, very useful, especially because these are things that are probably coming up inside of New Federal State of China News about form and all those types of things. So it could have been useful feedback for the international department.
I've been given the privilege to know what he's actually saying. This happened quite a few days ago, and no one has told me what he said yet. And I really wish I did know what he was saying when he was saying it. And I appreciate the fact that he can't talk English, or I don't expect him to talk in English when he's got something important to say. He just needs to be able to say it. But even if there was live captions like we've got right now, it would at least give me an idea. And I could have interjected in the conversation a couple of times then quite easily, and would hopefully have been able to have another conversation with him about what he's talking about now.
Also, I think like Miles know exactly the feedback. Like he's been talking to some important people from the West who can influence this whole movement. The people like the congressmen, or even the people in the US government or the West governments. So those people also having difficulty to understand, right? The only one way they can understand the movement, either from Miles Guo himself directly, but then they were facing the same problem you're facing, or they will watch the shows the University of China is producing. But if the shows are not doing the job, and then that would be still a huge gap. So he's actually the one who feel that if anyone doing a good job, and that's why he knows this thing needs to be done, in my opinion.
Definitely no maybe about it. I don't care who you are. I'm telling you it needs to be done because I'm a Westerner. I struggle to understand half of this stuff. Luckily, I'm blessed to have a stepmother who's Chinese, and now a few friends within the movement that are Chinese to try and help me. It needs doing, because I could not recommend any of this information to anyone I know, because they would just dismiss it as nonsense because they can't understand it. And it's a shame because the information is so valid, so important, so relevant right now.
Even to some Chinese people, like I have some friends who are Chinese, and I can't go to them with this information because it's just not communicating to the point where they can take it yet. And it's unfortunate because, like you said, the information is so valuable. And Miles is aware of this, I think, too. But he's only one person, right? He has this system to get intel and information he has created actually quite well to get it out there. But he can only go so far. He needs people to translate it properly.
Yeah, and it's not even anyone's fault when you think about it, because this movement was started by Miles Guo with Chinese people, and obviously the Chinese culture is different, so it's hard to get people who are not Chinese inside this movement unless they have got some kind of Chinese influence. I mean, if it wasn't for my stepmom, I wouldn't have even known about this, and it's only because my stepmom showed me and explained to me, and then I looked past the initial, whoa, this is a bit weird, this isn't presented properly for my eyes as a Westerner, and then I could see how important it actually is. But not everyone's got a Chinese stepmom, and not everyone's got that shoulder to rely on. My best friends have watched me a couple of times, and I can't even talk to them about it because they don't understand. And because I'm Chinese, I can't really explain. Luckily, the things that I told them a year ago happened. Thankfully, in the last few months, I say thankfully because the things that he said are not good. So because these things that are not good have actually happened, which I told them about a year ago, now they're starting to see that maybe, oh, this isn't ridiculous. This is something we need to pay attention to. But that only happened because the terrible things that Miles Guo said were going to happen happened. So they couldn't ignore it.
All right, so I'm trying to give my 2 cents. I might be wrong, but I'm the only one Chinese here. First of all, from my understanding, Miles' perspective, he said it very clear. The whole beginning of starting the movement, maybe back to 30 years ago, is we want to take down the Communist Party in China. And sometimes I think like that too, because he doesn't really lead everyone to listen to him to achieve that. Because Byron actually make a very good point. If he provide the information, the intel, and even people don't believe him, but he's consistently provide solid information, solid intels, and then been proven right, and then people will have to agree with him or believe him. So he doesn't lead to convey all this information or message accurate all the time, but in the same time he want to, because more people who understand that, more people will get saved or get help. But I'm kind of disagree what you said about this Chinese culture, because what happened right now in the movement is some frauds, the communication is not necessarily Chinese culture. I would say it's more like the toxicity behind the brainwash of the Communist Party. Imagine we all came out from this brainwash, crazy, toxic shit, and then we don't know what else to do. So somehow we have a little bit of a toxic way to talk, not clear. But I would disagree with the Chinese culture, because it's actually not. It's more like communist culture.
I appreciate that. Obviously, I've not been brought up in communism, and I've never been to China. So, you know, if I'm saying it's Chinese culture and it's not, I apologize for that.
That's the reason. I think you actually point out the problem right now. The West, all these non-Chinese people, they actually don't know what's the difference, right? So it's very easy to connect. Okay, this is Chinese, and Chinese people doing that, that's equal. That's what we're trying to do, is to tell people that actually is not equal. And that we're going to help a lot of people, especially what's going to count.
It's going to take a while, because even some Chinese people don't know the difference anymore. That's like how toxic the CCP mentality is, right? They've taken these things and they're like, this is Chinese. And this has happened in history too. It's not just the CCP. Like the example of the queues during the Qing dynasty, the long braids. When those first started being implemented, the Chinese people were pushing against that, and a bunch of people died. Like hundreds of thousands of people were killed because they wouldn't adopt it. And then towards the end of the Qing dynasty, when it started moving towards the Republic, they were ordered to cut all of them. Within that span of time, towards the end, they didn't want to cut them off. They thought that it represented them as Chinese people within just that amount of time. And then people ended up dying as a result for not cutting off the queues. So because they were so systematically brainwashed within that amount of time, they started identifying those things as part of their culture, when in actuality it was just because the regime was telling them that this is what you need to do now. So it's happening with communism. They're taking these things that are part of the communist mentality, and they're saying this is Chinese. Even Xi Jinping says this is communism with Chinese characteristics, because they're really trying to have the people believe that this is part of who they are.
I just want to point out what you guys doing and might seem small right now, but it's actually really meaningful. So take more credit than you think you should have.